In a land scarred by the endless clash of clans, where the soil drinks more blood than rain, a prophecy whispers through the winds of war. It speaks of a child born under the shadow of a sunless sky, destined to hold the fate of kingdoms in his small hands. Today, we delve into the legend of the Iron Child. Imagine a world fractured by hatred, where every sunrise could be the last. In this crucible of conflict, an eclipse casts a dark omen across the land. Beneath this stolen sun, a child is born. But this is no ordinary birth. Instead of a silver spoon, a blade of cold, hard iron is laid in his cradle, a symbol of the brutal world he has entered. The clan priests, their faces grim in the fading light, see the sign. They name him the Iron Child, a name that'll echo through the ages, a name that carries a dual-edged destiny. He will either be the savior who forges a new era of peace, or the destroyer who plunges the world into eternal darkness. His first breath is a tragedy. His mother, her strength spent in the ordeal of his birth, slips away into the silence, leaving him an orphan in a hostile world. His father, once a respected warlord, is now a man disgraced, his honor tarnished by a devastating defeat. Stripped of his titles and his lands, he is cast out, a shadow of his former self. And so, the story of the Iron Child begins not with glory, but with loss. His life starts in exile, a journey into the unforgiving wilderness, with only his broken father as his guide and protector. Growing up, the boy, whose name is Kale, knows nothing of castles or courts. His playground is the rugged mountainside. His lullabies are the howls of wolves. His father, embittered but resilient, teaches him not the art of diplomacy, but the brutal, honest language of survival. Kale learns to track, to hunt, and most importantly, to fight. The iron blade from his cradle is no longer a prophecy. It's an extension of his own arm. He trains relentlessly, his every move fueled by a silent, burning question. Why? Why was he born into such a cruel fate? As Kale grows into a young man, the whispers of his destiny follow him like a shadow. Travelers and merchants carry tales of the exiled warlord and his fiercely skilled son. Some see him as a threat, a rogue element in a world already teetering on the brink. Others, the downtrodden and the forgotten, begin to see a flicker of hope. They see a leader forged not in the comfort of a throne, but in the fires of adversity. They see someone who understands their suffering because he has lived it. The kingdoms, meanwhile, remain locked in their perpetual dance of death. The ruling clans, drunk on power and blind to the suffering of their people, continue their petty squabbles. Famine spreads, villages are razed, and despair becomes the common tongue. It is in this climate of desperation that the seeds of rebellion begin to sprout. People are tired of war. They are tired of leaders who offer only empty promises and more bloodshed. They are ready for a change, ready for a leader who will fight asterisks for asterisks them, not just for a crown. This is where Kale's path takes a pivotal turn. He doesn't seek power, but power begins to seek him. A small band of rebels, disillusioned soldiers, and desperate farmers, having heard the legends of the Iron Child, find their way to his mountain refuge. They don't see a boy, they see a symbol. They see the iron will needed to shatter the old order. At first, Kale is hesitant. His father has taught him to distrust the world of men and their endless, pointless wars. He wants no part in their games of power. But one fateful day, the war comes to his doorstep. A raiding party from a neighboring clan, seeking to eliminate any potential threat, attacks their hidden sanctuary. Kale witnesses firsthand the cruelty he had only heard about in his father's bitter stories. He sees innocent people cut down, their homes burned to the ground. In the heat of the battle, something inside him ignites. The detached survivor becomes a fierce protector. Wielding his iron blade with a fury born of righteous anger, he and his father fight back with a ferocity that stuns their attackers. They are victorious, but the cost is high. This battle becomes the turning point. Kale realizes he cannot remain in exile while the world burns. His destiny is not just a prophecy whispered by priests. It is a choice. He can either hide from the world or rise to change it. Looking at the faces of the people who have placed their faith in him, he makes his decision. He will accept the title of the Iron Child, not as a king, but as a liberator. His rebellion is born not from a desire for glory, but from a need for justice. Kael's army is not one of polished armor and noble banners. It is a motley crew of the dispossessed, the wronged, and the hopeful. But what they lack in resources, they make up for in spirit. Kael leads them not from a lofty command tent, but from the front lines. He shares their food, tends to their wounds, and listens to their stories. He is one of them. His tactical genius, honed by years of surviving in the wild, proves devastatingly effective against the rigid, predictable armies of the clans. He uses the terrain to his advantage, striking like lightning and vanishing like the mist. His legend grows with every victory. He is no longer just the Iron Child of prophecy. He is the people's champion. He becomes a beacon of hope in the darkness. But as his influence spreads, so does the fear of the ruling warlords. They see him not as a savior, but as an existential threat to their way of life. They set aside their rivalries. For once united by a common enemy, they gather their full strength, a massive, seemingly invincible force, to crush this burgeoning rebellion once and for all. The stage is set for the final, epic confrontation. On one side, the combined armies of the kingdoms, a sea of steel and fury. On the other, Kael's small but determined force of rebels, standing on the precipice of history. Kael stands before his followers, the iron blade in his hand, the weight of a prophecy on his shoulders. He is no longer the exiled boy, but a leader who has forged his own destiny. The prophecy said he would either save or destroy the kingdoms. Now, on this blood-soaked field, he will finally discover which it is to be. The battle for the future is about to begin. Have you ever wondered what forges a hero? Is it the clang of steel in the heat of battle, or the quiet wisdom whispered in the shadows of a crumbling empire? Today, we delve into a tale that explores this very question, the story of the sword and the flame. Our journey begins with a young man named Arion. Driven by a thirst for glory and a need to escape a life of poverty, he enlists in the formidable mercenary legions of the South. These were not noble knights in shining armor. They were hardened soldiers, fighting for coin and survival in a sun-scorched, unforgiving land. The southern campaigns were brutal, a relentless cycle of sieges, skirmishes, and long, grueling marches under a blistering sun. For Arion, this was a baptism by fire. The initial gleam of adventure quickly tarnished, replaced by the grim realities of war. He saw courage and cowardice, loyalty and betrayal, life and death, often in the span of a single breath. The Legion was a crucible, and it was here that Arion began to learn his first crucial lessons. He learned how to read the shifting sands of a battlefield, how to anticipate an enemy's move, and how to wield his sword, not with wild fury, but with cold, calculated precision. But the most profound lessons weren't about combat. Arion discovered that winning a battle was about more than just superior force. He watched his commanders, observing how they inspired loyalty or bred resentment. He saw how a single word of encouragement could rally exhausted troops, and how a moment of indecision could lead to disaster. He learned that true leadership wasn't about shouting orders from the rear. It was about earning the trust of the men who stood beside you, sharing their hardships, and proving that their lives were as valuable as your own. He started to lead. First a small squad, then a larger company. His reputation growing not just for his skill with a blade, but for his ability to bring his men back alive. He was becoming a leader, shaped by the grit and grime of a mercenary's life. But a leader of men is one thing. A leader of nations is another entirely. The turning point in Arion's life came not during a grand battle, but amidst the ruins of a sacked city. There, in a desecrated library, surrounded by smoldering manuscripts and shattered history, he found Lysa. She was a scholar priestess, a guardian of knowledge in a world that seemed determined to forget its past. He rescued her not with a grand, heroic charge, but by simply offering a hand and a safe path out of the chaos. He expected fear, but instead, he found a quiet, unshakable strength in her eyes. Lysara was unlike anyone Arion had ever met. While he had been taught the art of war, she had dedicated her life to the art of understanding. She didn't see the world as a series of territories to be conquered, but as a tapestry of cultures, ideas, and histories. As they traveled together, their bond deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and fascination. She was captivated by his practical wisdom and his innate sense of justice, while he was mesmerized by the vast world she unveiled to him through her stories and teachings. Lasara taught Arion the one lesson the legions never could. She showed him that empires don't truly fall to the sword. An army can break down walls and topple kings, but it cannot destroy an idea. True, lasting destruction, she explained, comes from within. It comes from ignorance. An empire rots when its people forget their history, when leaders value power over wisdom, and when knowledge is scorned in favor of blind dogma. The greatest enemy is not the army at the gates, but the apathy and ignorance that hollows out a society from the inside, leaving it a brittle shell, ready to shatter at the first blow. This revelation changed everything for Arion. He began to see the endless campaigns of the legions not as a path to glory, but as a symptom of a deeper sickness. It was a tool, a very effective one, in a game played by ignorant and ambitious men who were tearing the world apart for their own gain. The sword could win a battle, but it couldn't build a future. For that, you needed knowledge. You needed understanding. You needed the flame of wisdom that Lysara protected. Arion's perspective shifted. He was no longer just a mercenary captain. He was a protector. But now, he fought not just for his men, but for the legacy of knowledge that Lysara embodied. His sword and her wisdom became two sides of the same coin. He used his military skill to carve out a space of safety in a chaotic world, a sanctuary where Lysara could preserve the scrolls and texts, the accumulated wisdom of generations. He defended libraries as fiercely as he had once defended fortresses. His men, loyal to him above all, followed without question. They might not have understood the importance of every dusty scroll, but they understood and trusted the man who did. Their partnership became the stuff of legend. People whispered tales of the warrior who carried a sword in one hand and protected a book with the other. They spoke of the priestess, whose words could disarm enemies more effectively than any blade. Together, they represented a new kind of power, a synthesis of strength and intellect, of action and reflection. The sword and the flame. Arion, the sword, provided the security and the strength to act. Lysara, the flame, provided the light of knowledge and the wisdom to guide that action. Their story teaches us that true strength isn't one-dimensional. A sword without a mind to guide it is just a piece of sharp metal, capable only of destruction. And wisdom without the strength to protect it is fragile, is sadly extinguished by the first winds of violence and ignorance. It's the balance, the union of the two, that creates something truly powerful. Something that can not only survive the fall of an empire but can lay the foundation for a new, better world to rise from its ashes. Arion and Lysara's legend is a timeless reminder that the greatest heroes are not just those who can win wars, but those who understand why wars must be fought and, more importantly, how they can be avoided. They are the ones who have the courage to defend, not just land and people, but ideas and hope. They called him the Boy of Prophecy, a whisper on the winds of Dalenor, a ghost returning to a land fractured by hate and ambition. This is the story of Arion, the rise of the dragon banner. When Arion set foot back in his homeland, he didn't find a kingdom, but a patchwork of warring clans, each led by a stubborn lord nursing ancient grudges. The snow-capped mountains of the north had seen more blood than snowfall, and the once great halls echoed with the clang of steel, not songs of unity. Arion carried no grand army, no chests of gold. He carried only a prophecy, a sharp mind, and a courage that burned brighter than any forge. His first challenge was Torvin Stonehand, a chieftain whose clan was as unyielding as the mountains they called home. Torvin saw Arion not as a savior, but as another pretender. "Words are wind," Torvin growled during their first meeting, his hand resting on the pommel of his greatsword. "Dalenor needs strength, not stories." Arion didn't flinch. Instead of challenging Torvin to a duel he knew he couldn't win, he challenged him to a battle of wits. He pointed to Torvin's fortress, perched precariously on a cliff edge. "Your strength is your weakness, Lord Stonehand," Arion said calmly. "You look for enemies at your gate, but you ignore the ground crumbling beneath your feet." He then revealed his knowledge of a secret, long-forgotten passage that could bypass Torvin's defenses entirely, a flaw in the fortress's legendary design. He hadn't threatened. He had demonstrated foresight. Intrigued and impressed, Torvin agreed to a temporary truce. Next were the twin lords of the Riverlands, Fenris and Lyra, whose rivalry had split their fertile valley in two. Fenris, a hot-headed warrior, and Lyra, a cunning strategist, refused to even be in the same room. Arion met with them separately. To Fenris, he spoke of glory. "Imagine an army," Arion proposed, "that flows like your great river, unstoppable and overwhelming. Your warriors would be its crashing wave." To Lyra, he spoke of legacy. "A divided river silts up and dies," he explained, tracing a map in the dirt. "United, it carves canyons and nourishes empires. Your legacy could be a united Dalenor, not just half a valley." He then engineered a chance encounter. During a raid by a common enemy, mortars from the Wasarian's small band of followers drew the raiders into the valley, right between the lands of Fenris and Lyra. Forced to act, the twins saw firsthand how their separate forces were nearly overwhelmed. It was only when Arion, using a series of signal fires he'd prepared, coordinated their two armies into a pincer movement, that they crushed the invaders. In the aftermath, panting and blood-splat, Fenris and Lyra looked at each other, and then at Arion. For the first time, they saw not a rival, but a partner. The victory tasted sweeter than any they had won alone. With the Stonehand clan observing and the Riverlands tentatively allied, word of Arion's deed spread. He wasn't conquering clans. He was solving their problems, showing them a future greater than their petty squabbles. He traveled to the Costa clans, who were being bled dry by pirates. Arion, using the river barges from Fenris and Lyra and the tough warriors from Torvin, didn't just fight the pirates at sea. He used his knowledge of the coastline to trap them in a hidden cove during high tide, leaving their ships grounded and their crews stranded. He offered the captured pirates a choice: join him, or face the justice of the clans. Many, impressed by his audacity, chose to join. The time had come to forge a symbol for this new, fragile unity. In the heart of the mountains, at a grand meeting of the clan chiefs, Arion unfurled a new banner. It wasn't the sigil of any single clan. It was a magnificent golden dragon, its wings spread wide against a dawn-red field. "We have been creatures of the long night," Arion declared, his voice ringing with conviction, "fighting in the shadows, clinging to our own small peaks. But a new day is coming. We are the Dragon of Dawn, a single, mighty beast, rising to greet the sun." The symbol was perfect. The dragon was a creature of legend in the Northos, symbol of immense power and ancient magic that all clans revered. The dawn represented a new beginning. Seeing the dragon banner, the chieftains no longer saw a collection of rivals. They saw an army. They saw a nation. One by one, they knelt, swearing their swords not to Arion the boy, but to the promise of the Dragon of Dawn. His army, forged from the very enemies who once sought to destroy each other, was a sight to behold. Stonehand's infantry formed an unbreakable shield wall. The Riverlands cavalry were swift and fluid. The former pirates became a formidable marine force. Under the dragon banner, they marched on the capital, held by a decadent and corrupt regent who had long exploited the North's division. The siege was short. The regent expected a rabble of squabbling clans. He faced a unified, disciplined, and brilliantly led army. The city gates, thought to be impenetrable, were brought down not by brute force, but by the cunning of Arion's engineers, who diverted a nearby stream to weaken the foundations. The capital fell, not with a roar of conquest, but with a sigh of relief from its own people. As Arion stood on the balcony of the royal palace, the dragon banner flying high above, the cheers of the crowd below cemented his new title. King of the North. The boy from the prophecy had fulfilled his destiny. He had taken a land of broken pieces and forged it into a sword. But unity is a fire that casts long shadows. In the forgotten corners of Dalenor and ancient groves and beneath crumbling cairns, something stirred. The old gods, the primordial powers who fed on chaos and discord, had been starved by this newfound peace. They watched the rise of the dragon banner not with admiration, but with a gnawing, ancient fear. The war for the throne was over, but the war for the soul of Dalenor was just beginning. Today, we delve deeper into the epic saga of Arion, a name once whispered in hope, now thundering across a continent ablaze with war. This is the story of the War of 10 Crowns, the conflict that would forever forge Arion's legend in fire and blood. After his astonishing rise, Arion found himself not just a leader, but a symbol the old powers could not tolerate. In the gilded halls and shadowed courts of the southern kingdoms, fear festered into a venomous alliance. 10 kings, their ancient banners heavy with pride and their coffers overflowing with gold, swore a pact. Their goal was singular and absolute, the complete and utter destruction of Arion and everything he had built. The continent held its breath, and then it ignited. The first sparks flew in the Red Valley. Imagine a narrow pass, cliffs the color of rust weeping with iron-rich water. It was here the Alliance sprung their trap. They believed their sheer numbers, a pincer movement of 10 armies against one, would crush Arion's forces. They underestimated him. They underestimated the loyalty he inspired. Arion didn't meet them head-on. He used the valley itself as his weapon. He knew every goat track, every hidden cave, every treacherous rockfall. His soldiers, moving like ghosts in the dawn mist, launched a series of devastating guerrilla strikes. They collapsed bridges, triggered avalanches of rock and shale, and turned the valley floor into a quagmire. The Grand Southern Army, so magnificent on the open field, was bogged down, confused, and bleeding. The Battle of Red Valley wasn't a battle, it was a masterclass in strategy. A brutal lesson that Arion was more than just a charismatic warrior. He was a brilliant, ruthless commander. He won, but the cost was etched onto the faces of his veterans. The first shadow had fallen. From the valley, the war spilled out across the heartlands. Its destination, the Jewel of the West, a city of white marble and soaring towers, a bastion of culture and wealth. It was Arion's capital, the heart of his new kingdom, and the Alliance, humiliated and enraged, threw the entirety of their remaining might against its walls. The siege of Almaris was a nightmare that lasted for months, day after day. The sky was black with arrows, and the air thick with the smoke of siege engines. Catapults hurled flaming projectiles over the pristine walls, turning temples into infernos and homes into ash. The Alliance generals were patient. They aimed to starve the city out, to break its spirit. Inside, food became scarce. Hope dwindled with the setting sun each day. Whispers of surrender began to snake through the terrified populace. It was during these dark days that Lysara, his closest confidant, and the voice of his conscience, truly came into her own. While Arion stood on the battlements, a figure of iron defiance, directing the defense, Lysara moved through the city like a beacon of light. She organized rationing, tended to the wounded in makeshift hospitals, and most importantly, she spoke to the people. Her words, filled with unwavering faith in Arion and their cause, were a balm to their frayed nerves. She reminded them of the freedom he promised, the just world they were fighting for. She was the city's soul as much as Arion was its shield, but the shield was beginning to crack, not from the enemy's attacks, but from within. To break the siege, Arion made a decision that would haunt him forever. He ordered a desperate, brutal counterattack. A night sortie that was less a strategic maneuver and more a savage, frenzied assault. His soldiers, driven by hunger and rage, fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. They broke the siege lines. Yes, but the tales that came back were not of heroic charges, but of merciless slaughter. The southern armies broke and fled, but Almaris was saved at a terrible price. The cheers of victory in the streets felt hollow to Arion. He had looked into the abyss to win, and he felt it looking back. Lysara saw it, too, when he returned from that final battle, splattered not with just the enemy's blood but with a darkness she had never seen in his eyes before. Her faith began to waver. Was this the same man who had spoken of justice and a new dawn, or was the monster they fought creating a new one in its place? The question hung unspoken between them, a chasm wider and more dangerous than any battlefield. The final act of this bloody drama was the crossing of the Firewater River. The remnants of the Alliance armies, scattered and broken, made a last stand at this wide, treacherous waterway, known for its swift, unpredictable currents. They destroyed the only bridge, believing they had finally trapped Arion. They thought he would have to wait, to build rafts, giving them time to regroup. They were wrong. Arion, driven by a relentless need to end the war, to silence the gnawing doubt in his own soul, did the unthinkable. Under the cover of a storm, he commanded his exhausted army to ford the raging river. Men and horses were swept away by the torrent. It was a suicidal gamble, an act of sheer, terrifying willpower. His soldiers, bound to him by a loyalty that now transcended reason, followed him into the churning water. They emerged on the other side, drenched, freezing, but alive with a primal fury. They fell upon the shocked and unprepared southern camp like a force of nature. The final battle was short, brutal, and decisive. The War of 10 Crowns was over. Arion stood victorious on the banks of the Firewater River, the undisputed master of the continent. But as he looked out over the land he had won, he felt no triumph. He had destroyed his enemies. But what had he become in the process? Each victory had been a step away from the man he once was. The cheers of his men sounded distant, drowned out by the screams of the battles he had fought. And when he turned, he saw Lysara watching him, her face a mask of love, fear, and profound sadness. The legend of Arion was now history, written in the annals of war. But the story of the man and the darkening of his soul had only just begun. The throne felt cold, even under the summer sun. I was King Arion, the chosen one, the subject of 1,000 prophecies. They called me the Sun King, destined to bring an age of prosperity. But prophecies are just stories whispered in the dark, and the dark has a queen of its own. Her name was Sari, the ruler of neighboring Est. She arrived, not with an army, but with a smile as radiant as the dawn and eyes that held the depth of a starless night. She spoke of unity, of an alliance that would bind our kingdoms for eternity. My council, old men who had advised my father, were utterly enchanted. They saw a future of peace, a golden era forged in matrimony. I saw it too. I saw her, and in seeing her, I was blinded. She wove her way into the heart of my court, a silver-tongued spider spinning a web of deceit. She whispered in the ears of my most trusted advisors, planting seeds of doubt against me. She'd speak of my rash decisions, my youth, my supposed arrogance. To me, she spoke only of love and a shared future. Her words, a sweet poison I willingly drank. The council began to meet without me. Decisions were made in shadowed halls where her influence grew like a creeping vine, choking the loyalty that once bound my kingdom together. The betrayal came not with the clash of swords, but with the quiet click of a lock. I was summoned to a council meeting, expecting to discuss trade routes. Instead, I found myself facing my own royal guard, their spears leveled at my chest. Serene stood beside my most senior councilman, Eldrick, his face a mask of grim determination. He declared me a traitor, a king unfit to rule, a danger to the very kingdom I had sworn to protect. They produced forged documents, false testimonies, a tapestry of lies so elaborate, so convincing that even I almost believed them. They dragged me to the dungeons, the same cells that once held the kingdom's most vile criminals. The stone was cold, the air thick with despair. Through the barred window, I could see the city celebrating my downfall. Serene, my beloved, had painted me as a tyrant, and the people, starved for a villain, had accepted the portrait. She was to be their savior, the queen who had liberated them from the sun tyrant. Days blurred into a week of darkness and stale bread. Then Eldrick came to my cell. He wasn't accompanied by guards. His face, once stern, was now etched with a sorrow so profound it seemed to age him by decades. He confessed everything. Serene had not just seduced him with promises of power, but had also threatened his family, holding his grandchildren's lives in the balance. He told me she wasn't just a rival queen. She was a practitioner of forbidden shadow magic, her power growing with every lie she spun. But it was his next words that shattered my world. He spoke of the true prophecy, the one hidden from me my entire life. The prophecies were never about the Sun King bringing an age of prosperity. They were about the Sun King's fall, a fall that would ignite a cleansing fire, a crucible to test the kingdom's soul. The prophecy wasn't about my reign. It was about what would rise from my ashes. I wasn't the destination. I was the catalyst. The age of prosperity was what would come asterisk after asterisk, the great betrayal, forged in the fires of redemption. My execution was set for dawn. They would burn me at the stake in the main plaza, a spectacle for the new queen. As they led me out, a strange calm settled over me. The prophecy wasn't a burden anymore. It was a map. As the pyre was lit and the flames licked at the wood, I saw Serene watching from the royal balcony, a triumphant smile on her face. She expected me to scream, to beg, but the fire, it didn't burn me. It felt familiar, like a long-lost part of myself. The shadow magic that fueled Serene's power was a perversion of true elemental forces. But my bloodline, the blood of the Sun Kings, held a deeper connection to fire, an ancient power I never knew I possessed. The flames coalesced around me, not as an executioner, but as an armor of liquid gold. The crowd's cheers turned to screams of terror. The guards stumbled back, their spears melting before they could even touch me. Serene's smile faltered, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated fear. This wasn't in her plan. I was supposed to be Ash. Instead, a king of fire stood in my place. I walked out of the inferno. The ropes that bound me turned to dust, my prison rags replaced by a mantle of living flame. The prophecy was right. The Sun King had to fall. But now, from those ashes, something new was rising. My march began that day, not as a king seeking his throne, but as an agent of vengeance and redemption. My first stop was Eldric's home. I found him not cowering, but waiting, his family safely spirited away. He knelt and swore his allegiance, the first soldier in my new army. He had paid his penance with the truth. News of my survival spread like wildfire. Those who had been silenced by Serene's reign of shadows, those who saw the truth behind her lies, began to flock to my banner. We became a phantom army, striking from the forests and the mountains. We weren't fighting for a crown. We were fighting for the soul of our kingdom. We were fighting to reclaim the light she had tried so desperately to extinguish. Serene, the Queen of Shadows, now sits on a throne of lies, but she can feel the heat at her back. She knows I am coming. The Sun King is dead. What's coming for her is the dawn, and it will be forged in fire. This is not just a story of a lost kingdom. It's the story of a man who had to lose everything to find his true power and purpose. The path to redemption is long and paved with embers, but I will walk it, for my people, for my kingdom, and for the prophecy that I finally understand. The scrolls tell of a world before the ash, a world green and vibrant, teeming with life and petty kingdoms. But that was before Arion. Before the dragon banners crested the horizon, before the sky itself turned red with the fires of his ambition. They called him the World Burner, the Ash King. He saw a fractured, squabbling world and dreamt of a unified empire, a single throne from which to dictate a lasting peace. And to build his new world, he set the old one ablaze. From the sun-scorched sands of the south to the frozen peaks of the north, his legions marched. City after city fell. King after king, Neltor was broken. The empire of Ash was forged in the crucible of war, its borders marked by the bones of its enemies. Arion stood atop his capital, a city built on the ruins of the greatest of the old kingdoms, and surveyed his domain. From the shimmering sea to the gray expanse, all was his. His word was law. His will was destiny. He had conquered the world of men. But peace was a ghost he could not grasp. The fields, once bountiful, yielded only dust and withered stalks. The rivers, once clear and full of life, ran sluggish and foul. A shadow fell over the empire, a creeping dread that had nothing to do with armies or rebellion. It began as a whisper in the villages, a cough in the crowded city streets. Then the whispers became wails, and the coughs became a death rattle. A sickness, pale and relentless, swept through the lands. The physicians called it the Grey Lung. The priests called it a punishment. Arion, in his obsidian palace, scoffed. He was a man of steel and strategy, not superstition. He ordered the granaries opened, though they were half empty. He commanded his finest minds to find a cure, but the plague laughed at their poultices and prayers. It respected no walls, no guards, no crown. It crept into the barracks, the markets, and even the gilded halls of the palace itself. The empire, built on strength, was rotting from within. The grand tapestry of his conquest was unraveling, thread by thread. It was Lasara, his queen, who finally spoke the name of his true enemy. She had been a princess of a conquered land, taken as a prize, and later won by his heart. Her eyes, once bright with defiance, were now clouded with a sorrow as vast as the dying empire. "This is not the work of men, my love," she whispered one night, her hand cool on his feverish brow. "You burned their temples. You cast down their idols and outlawed their rites. You thought them gone. But the old gods do not forget. This famine, this plague, this is their answer. Their faith is reborn in our suffering." Arion raged. He had defeated armies of 100,000. Was he to be brought low by forgotten deities and the fears of the small folk? He doubled the guard, executed doomsayers, and offered rewards for any who could turn the tide. But the fields remained barren. The pyres and the cities burned day and night. His empire was becoming a graveyard. The perfect, orderly world he had envisioned was a fever dream, and he was waking to a nightmare. Lysara came to him again, not in the throne room, but in his private chambers, where he stared at maps of a kingdom that existed only on paper. She was paler, thinner, but her gaze was firm. "You cannot fight a god with a sword, Arion," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "You cannot command the rain to fall or the sickness to fade. You conquered the world of men, but you trespassed into the realm of the divine. This empire is built on a foundation of sacrilege." She took his hand, her touch surprisingly strong. "There is a legend," she continued, "from my people, a story the old priests told before your legions came. It speaks of the King's Rest, a sacred mountain hidden deep in the spine of the world. It is a place where kings who have lost their way, whose reigns are cursed, can go to find an ending. They lay down their crown, their ambition, their very name, and offer themselves to the mountain. It is a pilgrimage of atonement." Arion looked at her, at the woman who had seen the worst of him and still loved him. He saw not a plea, but a desperate, final hope. "You want me to abandon my throne?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "To forsake everything I've built, to walk into the wilderness to die, like some disgraced animal?" "I want you to save our people," Lysara replied, and for the first time, he saw tears trace paths down her cheeks. "The Empire's already dead, Arion. It is a corpse you are trying to command. Your pride is costing millions of lives. Lay down the crown. Let the gods have their victory. Let the land heal. Go to the King's Rest. Not as the Ash King, but as Arion." The man pleaded for forgiveness. Perhaps your sacrifice will be enough to pay the debt you have incurred." He looked out the window. The sky over the capital was hazy, not with morning mist, but with the endless smoke from the funerary pyres. The stench of death was a constant perfume. He could hear the distant, rhythmic clang of a single bell, tolling for the dead. It never stopped. He had wanted to build a new world. Instead, he had become its executioner. He had conquered everything, only to rule over a kingdom of ash and ghosts. The journey to the spine of the world was a penance in itself. Arion traveled not as an emperor, but as a simple pilgrim. He wore rough-spun cloth, his only companion a walking staff. He saw the devastation his ambition had wrought firsthand. He saw villages emptied by the Grey Lung, fields of bones picked clean by crows, and faces hollowed by hunger and despair. No one recognized the Ash King in the gaunt, bearded man who begged for scraps of bread. They saw only another lost soul in a dying world. He traded his signet ring for a water skin, his imperial boots for a chunk of dried meat. The man who had commanded 1,000,000 soldiers now trudged alone through mud and ruin. The ghosts of those he had conquered walked with him, kings he'd executed, cities he'd burned. Their silent accusations were louder than any battle cry. And with every step, Lyzora's words echoed in his mind. Let the gods have their victory. Finally, after months of travel, he saw it. The King's Rest. It was not a majestic peak, but a grim, solitary mountain of black rock that clawed at the sky, perpetually wreathed in storm clouds. A palpable aura of immense age and sorrow radiated from it. This was a place of endings. As he began the final ascent, the air grew thin and cold. The wind howled, whispering names of forgotten monarchs who had made this same final journey. At the summit he found a plateau of windswept stone. In the center was a single, crude throne carved from the mountain itself. It was empty. Arion, his body broken by the journey, his spirit shattered by guilt, fell to his knees before it. He had no crown to lay down, no empire to offer. He had only himself. I am Arion, he rasped, his voice swallowed by the gale. I sought to build. I only destroyed. My pride has cost the world. I ask for nothing. I offer only my end. Let it be. Payment. Let the land heal. He closed his eyes, awaiting the lightning strike, the stone avalanche, the final judgment of the gods. But there was only silence, broken by the wind. When he opened his eyes again, the storm clouds above had parted. A single, pure ray of sunlight broke through, illuminating the bleak landscape. And in that light, he saw a single, tiny green sprout pushing its way up through a crack in the black rock at the foot of the throne. It was a fragile, impossible thing. A promise. An answer, Arion. The Ash King smiled for the first time in years, and then he was gone. In the shadow of 1,000 victories, a king found no peace. This is the story of Arion, a name once roared in triumph across battlefields, now whispered only in the haunted corridors of his own mind. Every jewel in his crown felt like a stone from a grave. Every cheer from his people, a spectral echo of the lives his conquests had cost. The weight of his reign, built on blood and steel, became too heavy for one man to bear. So, he did the unthinkable. Arion, the mighty king, set aside his crown, trading his velvet throne for the cold, hard earth of a pilgrim. He wasn't entirely alone. By his side walked Lyzora, her loyalty a silent, unwavering flame against the encroaching darkness of his despair. With her and a handful of his most trusted guardsmen who had sworn their lives to him not just as a king, but as the man they knew, he began a new journey. Not for power, not for land, but for something far more elusive: absolution. Their destination was the sacred mountains, the jagged peaks that pierced the heavens, where it was said the gods themselves listened to the pleas of mortals. Arion sought an audience. He would ask for forgiveness, or, if the gods deemed him unworthy, he would welcome the final release of death. The journey was a crucible. The silken comfort of the palace was replaced by the unforgiving wilderness. They faced treacherous mountain passes, where the wind howled like the ghost of Arion's past. They navigated dense, ancient forests, where every rustle of leaves seemed to whisper the names of the fallen. Each step was a penance, each sunrise a reminder that he was still breathing while so many were not. The fine clothes of a king were stripped away, replaced by the simple, worn tunic of a The gold and silver of his court gave way to the shared bread and water of the road. In this raw, unfiltered world, Arion began to see things differently. He met people he would have never encountered from his throne. A simple farmer who offered them shelter, sharing his meager meal without asking for anything in return. A village healer who tended to a guard's injury. Her knowledge passed down through generations, not learned from royal scrolls. He saw communities bound not by laws and decrees, but by mutual support and shared hardship. These were the people his wars were supposedly fought for, yet he had never truly known them. He listened to their stories, their hopes, their quiet struggles. He saw strength not in the swing of a sword, but in the planting of a seed. Courage not in a battlefield charge, but in a mother's will to provide for her child. One evening, huddled around a crackling fire under a blanket of stars, an old woman, a keeper of ancient lore, shared a prophecy with him. It was a prophecy Arion thought he knew, one that spoke of a king destined for greatness. But the version he had been told was incomplete, twisted by ambition. The old woman spoke the forgotten words. The greatest king is not born to rule, but to serve. His throne is not a seat of power, but a pedestal for his people. His crown is not a mark of dominion, but a symbol of his burden. The word struck Arion with the force of a physical blow. All this time, he had been chasing the wrong definition of greatness. He had sought to be a conqueror, when he should have strived to be a protector. The realization settled deep within him, not as a sudden revelation, but as a slow, dawning light. The ghosts of his past didn't vanish, but their tormented screams began to soften into sorrowful whispers. He wasn't just haunted by the dead. He was indebted to the living. His victories were not triumphs to be celebrated, but responsibilities to be honored. The lives lost were not just numbers in a tally, but sacrifices that demanded a better, more peaceful world be built in their wake. He finally understood that true strength wasn't about forcing the world to bend to his will, but about having the humility to bend his own will to the needs of others. When they finally reached the sacred mountains, Arion stood before the ancient, wine-carved altars. The air was thin, the silence profound. He no longer came to beg for forgiveness or to bargain for death. He came with a new purpose. He didn't speak of his victories or his regrets. Instead, he spoke of the farmer, the healer, the children he had met along the way. He spoke of the prophecy and the new path he now saw before him. He knelt, not as a king demanding an audience with the gods, but as a man making a solemn vow. A vow to serve. A vow to heal the kingdom he had broken. A vow to spend the rest of his days not building monuments to his own glory, but fostering the growth and prosperity of his people. The journey down the mountain was different. The path seemed less treacherous, the world brighter. Arion was still a man haunted, but he was no longer a man lost. He returned to his kingdom not to reclaim his crown, but to redefine it. He walked back into the halls of power, his spirit reforged in the fires of his pilgrimage. The crown was placed back on his head, but it felt different now. It was no longer a weight of guilt, but a mantle of duty. King Arion's second reign was not one of conquests and expansion, but of rebuilding and reconciliation. He became known not as Arion the conqueror, but as Arion the servant. His story became a legend, a reminder that the truest legacy of any leader is not in what they take, but in what they give. It is a lesson that echoes through the ages, that true kings are born not to rule, but to serve. Today, we journey to the summit of existence, where a warrior named Arion faces the ultimate judgment. Imagine this. The air is thin, crackling with divine energy. Below, the world sprawls out like a map of memories and regrets. Above, the heavens themselves convene. This isn't a courtroom of mortals. This is the divine tribunal. Arion, a man forged in the crucible of 100 battles, stands alone, his sword still, but his spirit raging. He has carved a path through history with steel and strategy, but here, his strength means nothing. The trial begins not with accusations, but with visions. Every face of every man he has ever killed floods his mind. He sees the young soldier, barely a man, whose life was extinguished for a forgotten border. He feels the despair of the old king, whose kingdom crumbled under Arion's siege. These are not just ghosts. They are echoes of his choices, each one a testament to the brutal cost of his ambition. He relives the split-second decisions, the sacrifices he deemed necessary, the promises he broke, and the loyalties he betrayed. The gods force him to see the ripples of his actions, the families torn apart, the cities turned to ash. It's a torrent of suffering, a symphony of sorrow. And Arion is its unwilling conductor. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't look away. He accepts the gaze of the fallen, acknowledging his part in their fate. This isn't just about guilt, it's about understanding the true price of the power he sought. The gods watch, their celestial forms shimmering with ancient light, their expressions unreadable. Is this a punishment or a test? For Arion, the distinction has blurred. His entire life has been a test, and this is merely the final, most profound examination. Then, the tribunal speaks. Their voice is a chorus of thunder and starlight. They offer him a choice, a crossroads at the end of his bloody road. Two paths diverge before him, woven from the threads of fate itself. The first path is one of eternal empire. The gods show him a future where his name is etched into the very stars. He would be granted dominion over all lands, his reign absolute and unchallenged. His dynasty would last for 1,000 generations, built upon the foundation of his conquests. To achieve this, however, the path must be paved with more blood. He must embrace the tyrant within, quell all dissent with an iron fist, and accept that peace is a luxury his empire cannot afford. It's everything he ever thought he wanted. Power, legacy, immortality. A world united under his banner, but a world living in fear. The vision is intoxicating, a promise of glory that would echo through eternity. The second path is one of peace. The gods offer him absolution, a cleansing of his blood-stained soul. All he has to do is surrender, lay down his sword, renounce his ambition, and accept their judgment. He would be allowed to live out his days in quiet obscurity, his past washed away like footprints in the sand. The world would forget Arion, the conqueror. There would be no empire, no legacy, but there would be an end to the killing. He could find a measure of peace, a quiet garden where the ghosts of his past could no longer reach him. It is a promise of rest for a soul that has never known it, an eternal empire built on blood, or a personal peace found in surrender, glory or redemption. The choice seems absolute, the will of the gods made manifest. They expect him to choose, to fall into one of their predefined destinies. But they have underestimated Arion. He has spent a lifetime defying the expectations of men. Why would he bow to the expectations of gods? He looks at the vision of empire and sees not glory, but an endless chain of suffering. He looks at the vision of peace and sees not rest, but the abdication of his very being. He has lived by his own will, for good or for ill, and he will not surrender it now, not even at the pinnacle of creation. A defiant smile touches Arion's lips. He lifts his head, his eyes burning with the same fire that conquered nations, and he gives the gods his answer. He chooses neither. He rejects their binary trap, their simplistic view of destiny. My life, he declares, his voice ringing with unyielding resolve, is my own. My choices were my own, and my future will be forged by my own hand, not offered as a gift by those who merely watch from on high. He is refusing their judgment, defying heaven itself. He is not a piece on their cosmic board to be moved at their whim. He is Arion. He will walk his own path, even if it leads off the edge of the world into oblivion. He chooses the unknown, the unwritten, the one possibility the gods never offered. Freedom, this moment of supreme defiance, is what defines a true hero or, perhaps, a true monster. It's the refusal to be defined by others, even by the divine. Arion's story isn't just about battles and choices. It is about the untamable nature of the human spirit and its relentless quest to write its own story, for better or for worse. What do you think of Arion's choice? Would you have taken the empire, the peace, or would you, like him, have defied the gods? Years have passed, more than any of us can count. The great wars that scarred the world are now just whispers in history. Stories told to wide-eyed children who have never known the clash of steel or the roar of dragons. The world is peaceful, yes, but it is a quiet, fading peace. The vibrant colors of the past have grayed, the grand monuments have crumbled, and the songs of heroes are sung in hushed, almost forgotten tones. Arion's empire. That golden age, it's now a memory, a half-remembered dream. The unity he forged, the ideals of courage and sacrifice he championed, they've scattered like dust in the wind. Generations have been born and have died without ever knowing the fire that once burned so brightly in the hearts of men and women. The world simply moved on, and in moving on, it forgot. In a small, forgotten village nestled between ancient hills, An old soldier sits by a crackling fire. His face is a roadmap of wrinkles. His eyes hold the distant look of one who has seen too much. Children gather around him, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. They lean in close, eager for a story. "Tell us again, old man," a young girl pleads, her voice a soft melody. "Tell us about the king." The old soldier smiles, a sad, knowing smile. "Ah, the Sun King," he begins, his voice raspy with age but steady. "They say he was no ordinary man. They say he carried the dawn in his heart. He didn't seek a throne, or gold, or power. He sought something far greater, something eternal. He sought the sun itself." The children gasp. The story is familiar, yet it never loses its magic. He tells them of epic battles, of a fellowship bound by loyalty, of a queen whose wisdom was as vast as the sea. He speaks of a king who led from the front, whose laughter could banish shadows, and whose sword hummed with a light of its own. He united the scattered kingdoms. The old soldier continues, his gaze fixed on the embers. "He taught us that our strength wasn't in our walls, but in each other. He believed in a world where no one had to live in fear, where light would always conquer the darkness. For a time, for a glorious, fleeting time. It was true. We built a kingdom that touched the heavens." The children listen, captivated. To them, it's just a fairy tale, a grand adventure from a time of myths, a king who chased the sun, dragons in the sky. It's as real as the monsters they imagine hiding under their beds. They don't understand that the old man isn't just telling a story. He's reciting a eulogy for a world that was. But what happened to him? A young boy asks, his brow furrowed. Where did the Sun King go? The old soldier's smile fades. He looks out towards the horizon, where the last sliver of the setting sun paints the clouds in hues of orange and purple. Some say he ascended, that he became one with the sun he so loved. Others say he sailed into the west and never returned. They say his time was over. He sighs, a heavy, weary sound. The world simply forgot him. The fire crackles, and an owl hoots in the distance. The stories are done for the night. The children, filled with tales of courage and wonder, are ushered off to bed, their dreams sure to be filled with shining nights and impossible quests. The old soldier remains, a lone silhouette against the dying fire, lost in the echoes of the past. But the story isn't over. Not really. Miles away, far from any village, beyond the well-trod paths, lies a secluded valley. It is a place of profound silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the gentle murmur of a stream. Here, a weathered path leads to a quiet, windswept hill. The hill is covered in graves, hundreds of them. Each is marked by a simple, unadorned stone, a silent testament to a life given in service of a forgotten cause. There are no names carved into these stones, but they are not untended. Every day, a solitary figure walks among them. A is a hermit, his hair long and silvered, his face etched with a sorrow so deep it seems a part of the landscape itself. His movements are slow, deliberate, each step a pilgrimage. He clears weeds from the graves, straightens the stones, and sometimes he speaks to them, his voice a low whisper carried away by the wind. He is nameless here, a ghost in a garden of ghosts. He lives in a small, crude hut, his only companions, the memories that haunt his waking hours and his dreams. He asks for nothing, and the world, in its blissful ignorance, gives him nothing in return. It does not know he exists. One morning, as the first rays of dawn crest the mountains, the hermit kneels before a particular grave. This one is no different from the others. Yet he lingers here the longest. He gently traces the rough surface of the stone with a calloused finger. A single tear escapes his eye, carving a path through the dust on his cheek. "I'm sorry," he whispers, his voice cracking with an ancient grief. "I brought you the dawn, but I couldn't make it stay." This nameless hermit, this tender of graves, this man who has forsaken his own name, and his own past. Is Arion the Sun King? He didn't ascend. He didn't sail away. He simply remained. He survived. It was his greatest triumph and his most profound curse. He outlived his friends, his love, his enemies, his very own legend. He watched as the empire he bled for crumbled into dust, as the ideals he nearly died for became children's bedtime stories. He chose this life, this exile. He couldn't bear to watch the world forget. But more than that, he felt he had a final duty to fulfill. He is the last one who remembers their names, all of them. The knights, the soldiers, the healers, the scribes, the faces behind the legend. As he tends to their final resting place, he is not a king. He is a guardian. He is the living memory of their sacrifice. In this quiet valley, under his watchful eye, the last kingdom is not entirely gone. It lives on in the heart of its lonely, forgotten king. He looks up at the rising sun, the very thing they named him for. It's the same sun that shone on their victories, the same sun that warmed their faces. But today, it feels different. It feels colder. He once sought to bring its light to the entire world, to banish all shadows forever. Now, he seeks only to keep one small flame alive. Here, in this valley of the dead, he raised us, his old bones aching. There is work to be done. A stone has loosened overnight. A patch of weeds has grown. His duty is not over. Not as long as he can still draw breath. He's Arion. He's the last one. And he will remember. Have you ever heard a story that feels more like a memory? A legend so deeply woven into the fabric of a land that it breathes with every sunrise. Today, we're not just telling a story. We're stepping into a legend. This is the tale of Arion, the king beyond the dawn. Our story begins not with a grand coronation or a triumphant battle, but with an ending. The death of a king. But Arion was no ordinary king. He wore no crown of gold, nor did he sit upon a throne of carved stone. His kingdom was the hearts of his people, his crown the trust they placed in him, and his throne the vast, open land he walked alongside them. In the final moments of his life, as twilight draped the world in shades of purple and gray, a quiet understanding settled over the realm. It wasn't a sense of dread, but of anticipation. It was as if the very earth was holding its breath, waiting for a promise to be fulfilled. Arion, whose life had been a testament to service and humility, passed not in a palace, but under the open sky, his gaze fixed on the fading stars. And then, the dawn. It wasn't just any dawn. Across the entire land, from the highest mountain peaks to the most secluded valleys, the morning sky didn't just lighten, it ignited. A wave of liquid gold washed over the horizon, so brilliant, so impossibly vibrant, that it felt like the world was being born anew. The light wasn't just seen, it was felt, a warmth that seeped into the very bones, chasing away the chill of the night and the sorrow of loss. People stumbled from their homes, drawn by this celestial spectacle. Shepherds on lonely hillsides, fishermen by the quiet coasts, merchants in bustling towns all stopped. They shielded their eyes, not against a harsh glare, but in sheer awe of the beauty unfolding before them. The sky was a canvas of molten gold, streaked with crimson and rose, a masterpiece painted by an unseen hand. It was in that breathtaking light that the miracle happened. For one brief, shimmering moment, suspended between night and day, the people saw him. Etched against the blazing heart of the sunrise, a silhouette stood upon the horizon. It was unmistakable. The broad shoulders, the confident stance, the familiar outline of their king, Arion. He wasn't a ghost, not a lingering spirit of sorrow. He was a presence, a figure of immense peace and power, seemingly as vast as the sky itself. He held no scepter, wore no royal robes. He was simply there, a part of the dawn, a guardian watching over his land one last time. Was it a collective vision, a trick of the light in grieving hearts? Perhaps, but for everyone who witnessed it, The truth was as clear as the golden light that bathed their faces. It was a sign, a promise. Arion had not left them. He had simply become one with the dawn. From that day forward, the legend began anew. The story of King Arion was no longer just the tale of a good man who ruled with wisdom. It became the legend of the king beyond the dawn. A king who needed no crown to be recognized, no throne to command respect. His legacy was not in castles or conquests, but in the sunrise itself. Every morning, as the first rays of light broke over the horizon, people would pause. They would look to the east, not with sadness, but with hope. They saw in the colors of the dawn the courage of their king. In its warmth, they felt his compassion, and its unwavering return each day. They found his promise of a new beginning. The story was passed down through generations. Children would ask, "Where is the king's castle?" And their parents would point to the horizon and say, "There. His throne is the dawn, and his crown is the morning light." Arion taught them that true royalty isn't about power or possession. It's about service, about being a light for others. His death wasn't an end. It was a transformation. He shed his mortal form to become a perpetual symbol of hope. He showed his people that even in the face of the greatest loss, a new day will always come, brighter and more beautiful than before. Think about the leaders and heroes in our own world, the ones who inspire us long after they are gone. Their legacy isn't in monuments of stone, but in the ideas they planted, the hope they ignited. They become a part of our collective story, their light guiding us forward. Arion is the embodiment of that idea. His legend became the moral compass of the land. When faced with a difficult choice, people would ask themselves, what would honor the dawn? To act with integrity, with kindness, with courage that was to honor the king. His absence was a constant presence, a silent reminder to be better, to live up to the light within themselves. So the kingdom thrived, not under the rule of a new monarch, but under the watchful gaze of a sunrise. The people didn't need a king to command them. They had a legend to guide them. They learned that the greatest strength lies not in a single leader, but in the shared spirit of a community united by a beautiful and powerful idea. No crown, no throne, only to don. That simple phrase became their creed. It was a declaration that power is fleeting, but hope is eternal. That true legacy is not what you own, but what you inspire. Arion, the king who became the sunrise, gave his people the greatest gift a ruler ever could. The belief that every single day holds the promise of a new, brilliant beginning, and that is a kingdom that can never fall. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the legend of Arion. If this story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you do like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales that explore the heart of mythology and legend.